Welcome to the Modern Husbands Podcast, where any combination of Dr. Bruce Ross, Christian Sherrill, and Brian Page host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money in the home as a team. Today we welcome Cara Macksoud, who began her career on the New York Stock Exchange at the age of 17 while simultaneously attending the NYU Stern School of Business, where she majored in finance. Cara eventually became the youngest woman to earn a seat to trade on the New York Stock Exchange. She's the mother of 5 and CEO of Money Habitudes, a game-like assessment played either via physical cards or online to help people understand and talk about their finances in a fun, constructive way. Today's discussion centers around how couples can navigate money habits in their marriage. Enjoy the show. Cara, we are so excited that you're here joining us on the Modern Husbands Podcast.
I am so excited as well.
I got to start with how in the world you got a job on the New York Stock Exchange when you were 17 years old.
I feel like this comes up a lot, especially like you would think we're further along in the world of like male-female jobs don't mean a thing, right? But yeah. I still get so many women that come to me who want to be in finance and they still feel so, like the minority. And so I went to work on the trading floor at 17, really as a coffee runner. A relative of ours had worked down there. I was looking for a summer internship. I don't think I knew it was going to be a career, but day 2, I knew it was going to be a career.
And so you went from being a coffee runner on the New York Stock Exchange to owning Money Habitudes. So if you're tuning in, because we're going to talk about money habits, attitudes, and behaviors in marriage. So we promised to get that, but I had to set the stage because it's such a unique. You have such a unique story, going from someone who at the age of 17 was running coffee on the New York Stock Exchange, and then you ended up working full time on Wall Street. What was the wildest thing that you saw that you can share on a podcast? Wall Street.
So there's been a few wild ones. I always like to share the story of I was about 18, and I think this is one of those. We talk about financial inflection points. I think this is one of those that stuck with me for life and probably put me on the road to behavioral finance. I was about 18. I was still a coffee runner, but I had gotten a few more responsibilities, was managing some of my partners, more like assistant kind of work. And I came in one day and one of the partners said to me, "Hey, can you get over to Thomas Cook and wire my daughter 25? So his daughter had been traveling abroad. I don't know if you remember what Thomas Cook is, but it's like a foreign exchange. And she was traveling. So he asked me to send her the money. So he said 25 and he just said 25. Remember, on the trading floor, everything's in like symbols and acronyms and you cut everything short, right? So if somebody said to you, send my daughter, now I knew the daughter and I were about a year apart. So if I'm 18, she's somewhere between 17 and 19. And they said, send 25. How much money do you think that is?
$25.
$25. That's what I thought. So I go over to Thomas Cook and I send $25. And I'm working the rest of the day. It's about 2:00 and I get it's the trading floor. And I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? Right? Because that certain tone. It's like your mother calling you. And I walk over and he's like, what did you send my daughter? And I was like, $25, like you told me. And he's like, you were supposed to spend $25,000. And I was like, 25,000? She just got there last week. Like in my head, again, my dad was a school bus driver. $25,000 was like winning a $10 million lottery. Right? Like that was such an unrealistic number to me. What does a 19, 18, 17-year-old kid need with $25,000? I was so flabbergasted. So I think that was my first inclination. And honestly, Brian, I walked back to Thomas Cook to send the difference, thinking this kid is never going to be able to understand the value of a dollar.
Yeah.
That was my initial. And I think some people, when I tell the story, they're like, you were jealous. And I'm like, I don't think I was. I was definitely in a hard part of my life. I was working on the trading floor as one of the only girls. being given a hard time. But I remember thinking, if somebody handed me that kind of money, like without me having to put in the blood, sweat, and tears, I don't know that I would have appreciation for it.
No, no, I wouldn't either. I don't think, I think it would completely distort not just how you view money, but also kind of how you view the world. That is mind boggling. Now,
Mind boggling.
speaking of kids, you have five, which is a lot of practice. You have a basketball team in your
Oh
house.
no.
So what advice do you have for dual career parents? And like, you've had a lot of practice. So I mean, what you're going to tell us is essential, right? I mean, first of all, five kids. I have three. How do you do it?
I don't think there's a secret recipe. And I'm sure you know this, you know, you do what you can, right? I think my if I have to tell you my secret sauce
Yeah.
is I have great expectations of I already know I'm going to let people down. I go into this already setting the expectations so low. I wake up every day and instead of thinking about all the things I could do, I go with as long as everybody's alive by the end of the day, I win. Right?
You're
So,
like the Warren Buffett of motherhood. He was
well,
asked what the key to marriage was, and he said low expectations for each other. I love it.
I mean, it's kind of true, right? Like we set ourselves up for failure. If Brian and you and I have been around long enough to know the fantasy is always better than the reality,
Yeah.
right? So no matter what you create in your head, you've let yourself down already.
Yeah.
So the trick is, again, this is psychology, right? Like the trick is if you bring your expectations low, you always think you're winning.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think, I mean, I had some very structured parenting ways. They were not met well, and they were not well received by like the crowds, let's say. But I knew I needed structure. Again, I came from a trading environment,
Mhm.
which is they teach you how to have structure, right? And like you have to know your bounds and you have to have clear lines.
What's an example?
So we did no play dates, no team sports, and no, like birthday parties. And people thought that was crazy. How could you have little kids and you're going to have no social life for them? And I was like, listen, it's without, I'm an odds person. I do stats, right? 5 kids, do the math. I'm going to wind up having 2 of their best friends' birthday parties at exactly the same day at the same time. And how do I split the atom? If both my husband and I can't be available? Or how do you pick which kids go, which kids don't go? Right? So
You
let me
really?
just eliminate, let me just eliminate that. Right? And I can't say you can go, but you can't go because you know how kids are. They've got their little keeping, tabs. So I had to create rules that, yes, for some people they felt very severe, but I had to create kind of guidelines for our family that worked for the family and everybody knew they were non-negotiable.
Do you really need like play dates when there's five? I just got back
Well,
from my brother and sister in laws, and they have four, and they're constantly playing with each other.
exactly. Exactly. Mine are all less than 1 year apart. From 2005 to 2011, I have 5 kids. I have 5 kids in 5 years and 3 months. Like they're all almost twins. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's
You have
there was no
in play date like that.
exactly.
I bet that's fun for them. That's got to be fun in the house. I bet like the holidays are a blast.
Well, and think about it. What is most birthday party packages? They start at 8 people. So we are a birthday party package everywhere we go,
Yeah, yeah, that sounds like fun.
you know? So, but people, listen, I raised my kids for most of their lives in New York City.
Okay.
It's the land of the one kid families. And
Uh,
so, when you say we're not doing this, and other families are like, well, what do you mean? My kid wants your kid. And so it was very interesting because we were kind of like the fishbowl family, right? Like people are like, but again, to your point, we were trying to have 2 careers. And so to have 2 careers, that was raising 5 kids in New York City is not usually very common unless you have stupid money. And we didn't have stupid money. We were doing well, but not well enough that we could live in a penthouse with 4 butlers,
yeah.
right? So But it was a real decision, because when we first started having kids and we moved outside the city, both of us were spending an hour to an hour and a half commuting every day. And we've realized that all the money in the world can't buy time.
Right.
So we had to arbitrage the system. If we lived closer to our jobs, yes, that meant we had less. So, like, I always bring up scooters. The big thing in New York City for little kids was these scooters.
Okay.
You can't have 5 scooters when you only have 1,000 square foot apartment for 7 people. There's no room for the 7 scooters. So,
Yeah.
like, my kids were the kids without the scooters. And then they would ask me questions like, well, do we not have money for scooters? Like, why can't we have scooters? Right? But it was about space. But why had we lived in this small space? Because that's what we could afford, to be closer to our jobs, so we could come to our kids' musical performance at 11 a.m. because it was 20 minutes and we can walk outside our building, go to the thing, and then go back to work, instead of an hour and a half commute back and forth to Brooklyn or New Jersey or wherever it was that we were living prior. Right? And so that makes sense to our kids now. But when kids are 3, 4, 5, 8 years old, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But you try to explain to them that they're getting availability to you, right? Like,
Yeah.
daddy can't miss work for a musical thing if he's got to, go in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Daddy can go in a little bit earlier in the morning and come for your 11 o'clock performance and then go right back to work. He's back in the office by 10 to 12.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of your kids might not have ever had a scooter, but he's still in high school and he's flying a plane.
Right. Well,
We have that in common with each of us have
our aviation kids.
Exactly. Kids. Yeah. Okay. So I want to start to turn toward the topic of this, which is discussing money habits, attitudes, and behaviors in marriage. So let's start with you describing money habitudes to our listeners.
Yeah, so Money Habitudes is a money personality assessment to really kind of see where you are. So unlike other assessments that are in the marketplace where they kind of put you in a quadrant, you're a spender, you're a saver, you're money avoidant, anything like that, this is more of a 54 factorial. There's 54 statements, and it's where do you fall on each of the habitude. Examples of habitudes could be security, planning, giving, spontaneity. Where do you fall on each of these habitudes and how it's affecting your everyday habits and behaviors with your money, your underlying motivations around your money? And so we don't just look at what you're dominant in, which is the word we use when you've got more cards, let's say, in one habitude than another, but we look at the whole spectrum. Even habitudes that you might have a low, card count in, we look at that to say, how is that affecting your money management? Right? And what is that doing in your perspectives, in the way you see the world, the lens in which you use money to understand your opportunities, your positioning in your community, in your family, etc.
Yeah, it's interesting that I guess interesting is the wrong word. I think it's important to highlight that you have dominant traits, and then you have some that perhaps aren't as dominant, and those are going to influence your spending decisions. So, as an example, I took the Spendthrift and Tightwad survey, Dr. Scott Rick's survey, to see where I fell in his range, and it's only 10 questions. And according to that, I'm in like the 97th percentile with being a tightwad, which means that it pains me to spend money.
Yep.
Now
we have that in common, Brian.
Yes. So if you know me like Cara does, I don't enjoy spending money in most instances. But like using your program, for example, you're going to be able to recognize that although that's the case for many things, when it comes to experiences, I'm pretty liberal with my spending. You could argue sometimes I overspend when it comes to protecting my family or education. It's the same kind of thing. Like not just that I'm willing or I probably overspend there. It's just because it gives me joy. So I love the fact that you don't try to compartmentalize people into one category or the other, because it's money's messy and it's complicated.
And And I try to put this in the best layman's terms I can. When we think of money habitudes, I always think of your dominant habitude as the main character in a movie, right? But a main character in a movie can't do anything without supporting characters. And not every supporting character has the same big role as the main character, but because of that interaction, it creates the storyline. And that's what's happening with our money, right? Our main dominant habitude is what we might drive with, but as we bump up against all our supporting habitudes, that's going to be how it plays out in different scenarios of our lives.
So all of us have a little bit of Split in us. Have you seen the movie Split?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, was that a TV series?
It,
Anyway, I think it was a TV series.
As a Modern Husbands podcast listener, you recognize the importance of evidence-based advice from leading national experts for your marriage. That's why we know you will love our marriage toolkit. Nearly 50 national experts came together to provide bite-sized advice to manage the toughest topics couples face in managing money in the home as a team. Go to modernhusbands.com for your free preview of our marriage toolkit to start, strengthen, or rebuild your marriage. Once again, that's modernhusbands.com to sign up for your free preview of our marriage toolkit. Now back to the show.
So I want to we're going to do this, like, it's new, a 60-second challenge. So the goal here is for you to summarize a response in 60 seconds or less, and then we'll dive into some more detail. So these initial questions are about attitudes, behaviors, and habits. So are you ready?
yes.
All right, here's the first one. Can you explain how your attitudes about money can shape your relationship with it?
Absolutely. Right. If your attitude towards money is rich people are evil or poor people are irresponsible, anything that's your automatic attitude towards, right, you're going to bring that lens. And so your perspective when you have to work with someone may not be fully open. And you may lose an opportunity. You may miss an opportunity, right? You may not give yourself the full ability to immerse in something for that reason because you've shut it off.
That is a great answer. And I don't think that we need to elaborate on that, because that is a perfect response. Okay, so back to the 60-second challenge. What negative financial behaviors in relationships can create the most strain?
Oof. So, as you mentioned, being a tightwad, right? If your reasons for being a tightwad can run the gamut. Maybe you experienced some sort of financial trauma as a child. Maybe you had some experience. Maybe just the pain of paying and losing the next opportunity is overwhelming. You're just that person that always wants to feel in control of being able to make that next decision, whatever that might be. If that's not openly communicated and really massaged a lot between your partnership, and your partner constantly feels like it's towards them, like he doesn't love me enough to spend this on me, or this really means something to me, and he's not willing to give up his tightwadness in this situation, right? But maybe because there's no deeper conversation, it's not coming to you that this is the most important thing. You're just constantly hearing, well, we need to buy this and we need to get this and this would mean a lot to me. And there's not really a priority list of what is really impactful versus what's just, part of the main group, right? I think we leave a lot unsaid.
That is so well said. And I like how you share the relational aspect, because it's like when you look at money in a relationship, it's like this iceberg. So you can see the tip of the iceberg, which is usually just the decision itself. But underneath it is a foundation of not only your understanding of personal finance concepts and your understanding of your relationship with money, but then the reality is that there's a relational understanding that you have to have of your spouse. And if let's say your spouse, like you said, let's say you assume they're overspending, like that can be particularly difficult for someone like me who's a tightwad.
Right.
If there are two people who are perhaps spendthrifts, people who probably overspend, Yeah, eventually that's going to probably not
Catch up with them, right?
but throughout that journey, it's not going to be like this ongoing frustration and friction.
Right.
Uh, all right,
Can I give you a great example?
please do. Yeah.
So in our relationship, I'm the tightwad. My husband's the total spendthrift, and he is of the belief like you'll just plant another tree and figure out where more money should come from. And
Okay.
I'm like, the trees are all dying, and we should never spend anything, right? And so it's a very interesting relationship. And we met on Wall Street. We could go down that barrel in a second, but purely out of roles in the family, right? So we had the same career. Obviously, as I started to have kids and I got kicked off Wall Street, I became the primary caretaker in our household, which made me by default the primary grocery shopper, right? Like I became the buyer for all the things in the house. Now, he normally we bought everything together. On Saturday we ran errands together. But now all of a sudden he's working, I'm home with the kids, so I become our primary caretaker in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I go to the grocery store with my, tightwad ways, and I'm buying generic brand, I'm buying like the best deal, and I'm putting this stuff away in the house in the refrigerator, and he comes home, and his response was, am I not doing well enough for us? Why do we have Mickey Mouse orange juice, not Mickey Mouse, or whatever the brand, like knockoff brand orange juice is, not Tropicana? And I'm not even looking at brands. I look at price, and whatever's the cheapest, that's what we're getting. Like, I don't even, and for him, it was a reflection of, right? Like, am I not providing for us?
Wow.
Right. And so there had to be a real conversation, because I do think he's now feeling bad. I'm like, you're just ridiculous with money. I hated the way you spent it. So look at how much I'm saving us. Right. But there's, and it might sound silly,
No, not at
but
all.
it really could mean something to someone when they, like, if his role as the provider really means something to him, and he has some level in his head that he wants to provide to. And now I didn't realize at that time he lived through stages of his childhood where they didn't have name brand orange juice. So
Yeah.
like that for him was a big deal to be able to afford name brand. And I mean, to me, I think that's the stupidest thing ever, but you can't take away, like, just because I think it's stupid doesn't mean it doesn't mean anything to him.
That is a perfect example of why it's so important to have money conversations, because otherwise you're working through assumptions. And boy, oh boy, you can see how if you're him, you would think that.
Right.
And until he understands who you are and what drives you, you're going to feel less than. And you obviously have a great heart, because what you might have been able to say is, I don't think you're doing it good enough. You need to pick it up. He could have been earning even more money.
Well, and I thought here I was thinking I did a great job because I saved us XYZ on groceries.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that all those mixed, like, think about how many wires got crossed in that.
Oh my God. And what is so odd. What this is, I'm reflecting on when Hope stayed home for a few years, and she was like one of those couponers. I don't remember what.
Yeah, the people that clip all the double coupons.
Yeah. And I was stoked. Like, she would come home and show me how much money she saved, and I would have never said, what, I'm not providing enough. Oh my God. It was the greatest thing to watch her be, kind of, super frugal, not just frugal, but just really diving into it.
Well, and Brian, think about where he was coming from. I mean, again, Wall Street, you've got that ego, that correlation. We can't take out of the equation certain jobs come with certain correlations of the way you produce. We were two producers on Wall Street, and I stepped back to raise our kids, which was, I mean, we cut our salary in half, right? And so when we committed to that, I think as the man of our household, right, it was this thing of like, I'm going to step up to the plate, because at that point I made exactly, if not maybe a couple of dollars more than he made at that point. Right. But we remember, biology doesn't allow us to, rock, paper, scissors, who's going to have the kids. There's only one of us that has the parts.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
we like to say all things are equal, but they're not. They're not equal. And we need to have better conversations around we're not equal. We are different. It's not about equal. It's about differences and where can you benefit with your differences and I can benefit with my differences. What can I execute? What can you execute?
Yeah. Now, I want to go back to the 60-second challenge. So we've talked about the negative financial behaviors in relationships that can create the most strain. Conversely, what positive financial behaviors in relationships can strengthen a marriage?
Well, I mean, again, if that conversation piece can come into play and you can really utilize what we see with the habitudes is when couples are working well, even if they have different habitudes, even if they see it through different lenses, they can utilize each other's habitudes. So when I say that, we look at situations and again, you just heard about my husband and I. Again, he's still a spender. I'm still a tightwad. We're 25 years into our marriage. We're in a better financial situation than we were in, obviously, when we were kids. And I still have a hard time sometimes pulling the trigger on buying stuff because I will go, could I get it cheaper? Is it going to go on sale? Like I'll go down and he's like, don't waste the time. Enjoy the time. Let's just do it. And so by being able to utilize each other, I sometimes can't even just click the pay button, but I can put everything in the cart. And I have to tell you, and to your listeners, they may think I'm silly and ridiculous, but there are times I will put a whole cart of stuff together, whether it's a vacation, items, whatever it might be. And I'll just say to him, it's in the cart when, click pay. And by relinquishing my duty of having to click pay, I can actually enjoy it that much better.
I love it. I love that's great. I'm going to use that strategy when Hope and I go out for whatever. Let's say it's dinner. I don't look at the bill. She grabs it. She takes care of it because it just destroys all the joy that I had experienced to that point. Yeah. Right. Wow, that is really smart. The shopping online, throwing it in the cart, and then telling him or your spouse.
And he loves that moment of buy now. Like he just loves, it's his favorite thing to do. He loves, we were execution traders. I'm not shocked that he just loves to execute, right? But he brings him so much joy. So it's, but again, how long did it take to get to that place where you know each other so well that it's like leaving somebody the favorite part of the cupcake. Like I'll eat the whole cupcake, but I'll leave you the favorite piece.
That's a great analogy.
Right? Oh, and I think that kind of synergy is really the beauty, because when things get tough, you can access those memories and it'll get you through. At least for me, it's pulled me through some of the tougher times.
I love it. All right. So we've got 2 more 60-second challenge questions.
Yep.
Are you ready? All right.
Yeah.
Will you share what bad financial habits can be hardest to deal with in a marriage?
So I think the worst one that I've experienced is the no conversation around something, but resentment or disagreement with the way somebody's doing something. Okay. So if it never gets spoken about, it keeps, as I call them, rug sweepers. If you're a rug sweeper, right, that's really going to, because eventually think about a rug. I'm a very literal person. Think about a rug. You sweep a toy under the rug, another toy. Eventually, the rug is all uneven. When you go to walk on that rug, you're going to trip. And when you trip, now you're falling on those hard things underneath that rug. It can break you, right? So rug sweeping is probably the biggest downfall.
Okay, so conversely,
because when it's on top of the rug, just to bring you back to the analogy, you can see it. So you're less likely to trip over it because you can see it, right? When it's on top of the rug, you can see the items. When it's underneath the rug, they're slightly hidden. So you're tripping and you're falling and you don't know what's happening.
I love the analogies. You're on fire here. All right. So conversely, what are good financial habits that couples can employ in their marriage?
Right, I'll go to that flip side of the coin, that keeping it open, honest, whether it's good or bad, celebrating. And I really, really, really stress to couples, celebrate all the wins. celebrate them. I don't care if they're small. I don't care if they feel minute. I don't care if it's a coupon. Like if you work on something together or you use each other to come up with an idea, celebrate it. Because that kind of teamwork, look, I forget which book it's in, but I don't know if it's Nudge or Predictably Irrational. One of them talks about how we don't really get a whole lot of practice for the major life events that we live through. And marriage, although you might be married to the same person, seasons of the marriage, times of the marriage, has all these different emotional things going on with it. You're in a different place. You're going to do three different things. So the more practice you can get at, ebbing and flowing through things, the better, more skills you'll have when things are right. The wins somehow don't get celebrated enough because you're like, oh, it was a win. But when the little things that then turn into monsters that destroy us, we've got no skills to handle them.
Well said. Okay, so we like to end our podcast with one simple and actionable step that our listeners can take away. What would that be based on today's conversation?
So, especially if we're dealing with couples, I would say go home and ask the person, if you won the lottery tomorrow, what would be the first three things you would do, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this much, if it's go to work, like if there's still something about work in that conversation, then it should relinquish you of this aggravation of like, I have to go to work, right? It should relinquish you of that. And then both of you can be more supportive towards what it looks like with the time you're spending away from each other at work and give you more value for the time you're spending with each other.
What a wonderful conversation. Thanks for joining us, Cara.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to be here.
A special thanks to our guest and, of course, to all of our listeners. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcast, give us a rating, and share the Modern Husbands podcast with others. Doing so goes a long way in growing our reach. And join your fellow Modern Husbands and have links to our podcasts, articles, and other resources to manage money in the home as a team sent to your inbox every 2 weeks by subscribing to our newsletter at modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.